Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Art of Prevention podcast. And yet again, I have another amazing guest. And today, my guest has a very, very long CV. So I'm sitting down with Beau Beard, and I actually heard about you, Beau, from one of our mutual friends, Dan O'Quinn, when he and I were both at the Paraquat Clinic together. And
Yeah.
then I heard more and more about you. And then we finally got to hang out when we both did the DNSD course in Prague. So amongst your accolades or accomplishments, Doctor of Chiropractic from Logan University. Did you also get the master's degree there too?
In the sports science and rehab. Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, tons of continuing education ranging from SFMA, FMS, all the way to DNSP, DNS practitioner, a load of other things. You've done a TED Talk, you've written a book, Age of Movement, and now you're sharing all of your knowledge with other clinicians with your continuing education, art of assessment, and rethinking running rehab. Funnily enough, the thing that kind of sticks out to me is one, I'll let you go from here and tell us a little bit more about your backstory because you've got quite a varied backstory. But man, what got you into running? That's just the thing that sticks out to me. I mean, high school football, college football, and now you're doing, a good amount of lifting too, but it seems like you're really getting into the ultra marathon. So what made that transition happen?
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. In the book, The Age of Movement, and I've told the story, on our website forever, because that's why I do what I do from a job standpoint. But I broke my femur when I was 9 or 10 years old. I say 9 or 10 because I'm old enough that I don't remember. So there you go. But fractured my femur, had a titanium rod put in. The story goes, I had no PT, didn't know that was a necessity at that time, which funny enough, quick side story, which I'm sure there'll be many. I just treated a girl that's a 16-year-old track and field athlete, which we may talk about. Actually, we just talked about her case on the last week in review. She had a femur fracture, had no PT prescribed, and her parents had to ask for PT. So just quick side note on that. So I had this femur fracture, ended up, as somebody with a big trauma, having a bunch of movement, competency or compensations and issues that I was unaware of until I got to a higher level of sports. And then coaches made me apparently aware of, me limping and not being able to move like they thought I should be able to, which then I was lucky to work with especially at that time, we're talking, 2000, super high level chiro that was a, previous medalist in the Olympics and things like that. So I had this my initial introduction to chiropractic was from a high level, sports rehab model. And I say rehab, like she owned a gym, she practiced in her own gym that she owned. So it wasn't just a sports doc, let me tape you up and adjust you. So that was kind of the backstory with that. Getting into running, running was not my jam. I was a sprint athlete. I didn't, I wanted to lift weights. I didn't want to move more than, I had to for conditioning purposes. And then, when you get out of collegiate sports and, my dream of being in the NFL was dashed by me being a 6 foot, 200-pound white guy that's not that fast. And I moved to Alaska. And my sister asked me to be part of a 5K. It's called the Bear Claw Classic in Eagle Ridge, Alaska. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm not going to train. I'm an athlete. And I go out and I get my ass whipped by a mom pushing a trike stroller with a kid in the stroller in the last 800 meters. And I am all out, like, this is all I got. And that was humbling. And me being competitive, I was like, that's not going to happen again. And luckily for me, I was in Alaska. I lived, if anybody's familiar with Anchorage, Alaska, Flat Top Mountain was less than a 5K away from my house. So I would numerous times a week run to the top of this 3,000 foot mountain and run back down. And that's kind of how I got into trail running. And then I got jaded. Road running was boring after doing that multiple times a week in Alaska. So then I moved to St. Louis and I was like, oh, this isn't quite the trail scene as Anchorage, Alaska. So I started, delving out, if anybody is familiar with St. Louis, to Castlewood State Park and these places, started racing more. Looking back, I thought I was hot shit, like winning races. Like these are, I was at the top of the bottom of the pile, basically. But that motivated me to win some of these things and keep going. And then it was kind of a parallel fueling of passions that I got into running. Thought I was kind of good at it. I loved doing it. It was just a good like burn off of stress and energy during grad school while I was learning about, biomechanics and treatment and rehab and all these things. And I think they just kind of melded together. And funny enough, if you remember, do you remember the Alpine shop that was out in, there's numerous ones, the outdoor store, climbing store that was locally owned, one in Kirkwood. I
Oh,
think
why does
where,
that
but
sound
anyways,
familiar?
I taught my very first seminar while I was still going to school at the Kirkwood location of the Alpine shop on trail running injuries, which looking back was absolute dog shit. But it was what it was. I asked to do it. I wanted to feel uncomfortable. So yeah, I got into running, but I also very quickly parlayed my kind of passion of running into a professional, niche. And that's what I did when I came here to Birmingham, was say, hey, I want to be involved in the trail running scene, which also luckily was growing crazy when we first got into practice. Right. That's that year. It was in one of my slides that it grew 437% the amount of races from like 2014 to 2015. Right. This is the explosion of like trail running, ultra running. So yeah, it just kind of blew up, and right time, right place, good fit. Cause I like doing it. I like treating the people in it. Other than trail runners are terrible patients, just like a runner, right? They just want to be good enough to get back out there and do it. And then they're like, see you later, man. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the intro story.
Gosh, what a cool story. I'm kind of the opposite. I was a runner all throughout high school and then college, and then I got kind of like the opposite jaded. But it is pretty kind of funny, like going to those little rural 5Ks and stuff like that, or even those little 5Ks around. And people think that you're on steroids when you're on like a 16-minute 5K, And it's
Yeah.
like, if only you knew what I used to be able to do, right?
When that's the
And
thing, like I didn't even know what I didn't know, right? Like I thought I was doing good. And now, I mean, I have two, ex-collegiate runners that are clinicians in here that would just wipe the floor with me at any given point. And I'm like, oh yeah, like, which funny though, saying that the differentiator, as you said, tends to be distance, right? So as you get up into the ultra world, being fast at a 5K may not translate. And that's where you can kind of weaponize like, okay, I'm a little bit better at, the endurance thing, maybe at my age, or just that's kind of my jam. But yeah, now I'm leaning into that a little bit, even though I've never done a 100 miler. The longest race today is 55K. And I don't know if that's ever going to be in the cards. It's just, I don't know. Every time I think about it, I talk to somebody else that I treat here, and it's like the worst thing I ever did in their life. And I'm like, I don't know. We'll see.
yeah, they always say it's the worst thing they've ever done in their life, but then they're always like, "Oh yeah, I've got another one set up
Yeah.
for in 2 months, and I'm hella injured right now, and I need
Can
you
you
to,
can you get me there? Yeah.
yeah, can you get me there and in one visit too?"
For sure.
And it's like, all right, well, we've got a bit of an uphill battle ahead of us. So now we're usually on the side of treating a lot of these injuries, but
Mhm.
one thing that occurred to me was I'm treating all these recurrent injuries or all of these things that a lot of times are very much preventable. So, what's some information that you've gleaned from the clinical side as well as your personal experience that I can tell people these are some of the things to look out for? Or these are some of the things that we need to do to try and prevent this vicious cycle from occurring over and over and over again. I hope that you're enjoying this episode of the Art of Prevention podcast. I wanted to let you know about a new resource that is available on our website. And this resource is specifically for runners who want to strength train. So, we all know from our previous podcasts and many guests on the podcast that strength training is essential for runners to, one, improve their running economy as well as decrease their chances of injury. For being an awesome listener to this podcast, all you have to do is go onto our website and click on the sports icon and then go down to running, and you'll see that PDF pop up, Strength Training for Runners. And for being an awesome listener, I'm giving a 20% discount if you type in podcast in all caps at checkout. This PDF I hope will help out a bunch of people and get more runners into the weight room with the right types of programming. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
Yeah. So I'll tell a dumb story on myself. So I was in I started grad school in 2009, and that's when Born to Run came out, the Christopher McDougall book.
Oh
So
God,
you
I
put
think I know where this
somebody,
is going.
oh yeah, so you put somebody that's pretty new to running, new to trail running, new in graduate school where you're surrounded by biomechanics movement nerds. And what do you start doing? I literally remember going to the New Balance shop again in Kirkwood because that's the only place that had five fingers, right? Being like, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm gonna run like this. Buying those things, running on the sidewalks, and things, roads around my apartment complex. And, at that time was,
Oh,
where was I don't know if I was in Chesterfield proper, but wherever. Um, and what happened? Absolutely blew everything up below the knee, calf strains, Achilles
oh,
issues. And I'm hobbling into class like the next day after running like 3 miles, and people are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, it'll get better. Um, it I did attenuate to that, and this is the story, right? You can accommodate or adapt to most things. I mean, that's literally the superpower of a human as a species, is the ability to adapt. You can't adapt overnight. And if you're familiar with Casey Lichtig, she's a super popular ultra runner. She's also a PhD PT. And her PhD thesis was on like, should you run shod or unshod, right? Like barefoot shoes, or should you run in regular shoes? The conclusion of her research was basically a giant meta-analysis, was whatever you ran in coming up, high school, college, early adult life, that's probably what you should stick with. Why? Because it's hard to adapt to something else, even though it may get, perpetuated as like it's better to be zero drop, whatever we're talking about. Uh, so yeah, I was the dumb that had to learn from personal experience that like, God, I came from a sprint background with a fairly kind of, tight lower quarter. And then to expect that to change into this kind of flexible, elastic recoil machine that's going to run 3 to 5 miles and do that in a week is like bananas. So that we all kind of know inherently, whether we call it the 10% rule, do too much too fast from a volume standpoint, but also that goes for overall adaptation, right? Are you trying to do, or, you're already doing high intensity interval training. And you're like, I am going to train for a half marathon. Well, you're just adding more too, even though, yeah, you're already running, you're still working out. Like you have to balance the equation would be my one big thing for, clinicians, athletes, coaches. And the from the ultra running, trail running side, maybe I'm biased. I think one of the best ways to do that is change your KPIs. So what I mean by KPIs, a lot of people look at mileage, right? In our town, in our track club, it's you get your jacket if you run 1,200 miles every year, from the Birmingham Track Club or whatever it is on Strava. I would say if you look at somebody like Jason Koop, who's a highly respected ultra running coach, and his, CTS Carmichael training systems, you're going to see that every coach in that program looks at time versus mileage. So it's going to be the amount of time you spent training, which is spread across all avenues of training, cross training, weightlifting, whatever it is, skimo, bike, swim. You have basically an allocated amount of time, both from like if you're a working stiff, you have kids, of how much you can put into training, but then also like how much the expectation is of like what's your training age, right? Versus chronological age, like how much adaptation do we expect to occur? I think that's a really clever way for people to shift their thinking, but that is also really hard to get a runner to be like, hey, I know you want to hit your 70 miles per week because that gives you this like mental buffer of I'm going to be okay, but like, you may like be better off 8 hours of training, maybe, and sometimes it's more training, right? They're doing 6 hours, but it's just running. We're like, dude, you could get 8 hours, have a bigger effect because you're spreading it across different disciplines or activities, better effect, less running, better recovery, less injuries. The tough thing is what you're dealing with the mentality of a runner, which tends to be most of the time a stereotypical type A, control freak. I need to hit my systematic kind of KPIs, and that's if you could make that mind shift change with your athlete or patient, it's a game changer because they also look at stuff different overall, and they're like, God, I am a little beat up. I'll switch. I can, I don't have to run my miles. I can go row. I could go, to the gym, something like that. So yeah, that'd be my biggest one.
I so wish that that was a message that had been portrayed to me when I was such an injured runner in undergrad, because there you're just looking at mileage and being with the team and trying to do as much as or more than all of the All-Americans and things like that, because that's your goal, is to be those guys. And sometimes it's tough to really look at where you're at and the training loads that you can handle and then modify the training that you're doing to be commensurate to what you can handle, especially when you throw in other. I think the points that you made about monitoring variables and all of your training variables are just such amazing points, because the big variable change for you was the footwear variable, right? The amount of
Yeah.
cushioning underfoot. And it's a dramatic change. There's a reason why you don't see five fingers anymore. And part of
Yeah.
that reason is because Vibram lost basically like a $75 million class action lawsuit
Yeah.
because of people with your exact story, but actually had probably like quite a bit less resilience and got, nerve damage and stress fractures and things like
Yeah.
that.
Thinking back, I should have tried to get grad school paid for. What am I doing?
Do you
Man,
know, you could
terrible
have,
move.
right?
Yeah. Well, to add to that point though, something we talk about in RX3 is, they've done studies on the phenotyping of runners. So it kind of breaks down into, you have a neuromechanics based runner and an aerobic runner. So there's a differentiator right there. Like
Okay.
some people do better with more volume. Well, again, does that volume have to mean running? Not necessarily. More aerobic work. Some people do better with less volume, but higher intensity work. And this probably gets into genetic components, mental components, how you trained, growing up. So even there, right there, you're like, okay, there's differentiators. Like people should be doing different things. And we think about like soft tissue kind of spectrum, right? Some people are just naturally more flexible from a collagen matrix than other people. That may be a differentiator. So again, from the clinical side, like we want to be N equals one. From a coaching side, you do too, even though you may be in a team setting, you can't be so like individualistic, but you can group people together based on, training age, some phenotype things. And again, the best coaches in the world, even if it's not on purpose, right? It was a bit intuitive or whatever, do that, right? ABC groups and, within a squad or something like that. It just kind of happens because you can see the writing on the wall. Like not all these people are going to be doing the same stuff. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, I will say I was really, really fortunate with the coaches that I had coached me when I was in high school and college, because we had those ABC groups and also differentiated mileage and intensity based on what those athletes were running. So we had, when I was in high school, we had the longer distance crew and the shorter distance crew, and we had ABC groups within that.
Wow.
Same thing in college. And I'll tell you, after I got to run under Coach Damon Martin, who's the guy that took over Adams State after the legendary Coach Joe Vigil, although Damon Martin's a living legend in his own right as well. And there was a line of people to talk to him after every single like group meeting, and when Coach told us like what we were doing for the day. And then Coach would give individual advice to all of those people. Oftentimes I was in that line myself. I don't know if I just felt like I needed more special attention because I was not as fast as I wanted to be, or I was just perpetually coming back off of an injury or something like that. But yeah, he really took that time with every single one of those people to go into, this is actually what you need to do for the day. This is what you need to do for the day. Here's some special training for you and what you need to do after the workout. All of these different things that you're talking about. And I think that you're right. And I think there's a reason that your art of assessment coach or class is called the art of assessment, right? And then rethinking running rehab is rethinking and diving into those little details and those nuances, which is something I'm sure you also did with that high school runner that you talked about, that femur fracture, right?
Yeah, that's, the art of assessment is kind of at the core of any seminar that I am teaching or will teach in the future, because I think it's just paramount to, clinical outcomes are based on clinical competency, but competency then leads to confidence. So it's not only skills and what you can make happen with the patient, but how you convey that to them, how you can communicate it, build rapport. As Brett would say, Brett Winchester, rapport and reassurance are your two, superpowers that you need to master. Well, that doesn't come, in my opinion, it doesn't come as a character trait that you work on. It comes from competency clinically, that it just then like oozes out of you. So then it's an authentic, communication or authentic message to the patient. So yeah, the art of assessment is just, for me, it's just a roadmap. It creates clarity of how I go from, a history to the exam to a clean audit system to the best intervention point. And I say best, I should air quote it, because there's multiple intervention points with every patient, but I would hope as clinicians, we're always over our lifespan of a career, honing of like, man, could we get a lot closer if I referred somebody to you or, Rich Olm or somebody that we're all like, yeah, I kind of do the same thing because I think the same thing's going on. That would be ideal because if we look at other fields, that's what happens most of the time. We're an outlier for a lot of reasons. But then, kind of the end is like, well, what's the patient's goal versus what I think they need to do? Those things need to coincide. But when you look at a runner, it's kind of interesting. If we go back a little bit to what we were talking about before, think of like an NFL team or a college football team, specialty and positions, right? I get that that's different, but even every position would have a different kind of coach. Every position would have different types of workouts they're doing, different types of stretching. Yet, like you said, you had an individual, but like in the running world, we just think, oh, distance runner, sprint athlete. Like that's usually the biggest differentiator versus, like the wild differences. So wouldn't it be cool if there was some sort of system for a coach? This is a clinical system, the art of assessment, but some sort of system where like, hey, you can phenotype a runner based on some of the things we were talking about. And pretty soon it doesn't come down to just experience. Like the coach is like, oh, I think you should be doing this because it's evidentiary. And then that can go across coaches, across the program. That would be kind of cool. Now, is that feasible? I don't know. I mean, you kind of see a fundamental capacity screen, in FMS land, which is kind of trying to go after that as a broad athletic endeavor, not sport specific. I think it can be done. We do a runner screen in RX3, which I've basically stolen some things from FCS, FMS, some things from research, right? Like a pogo jump or a triple jump that would kind of, show your ability to handle ground reaction forces. Yeah. And we just I smashed those together. The reason why I found myself looking at how a runner would carry, unilateral weight, how long they could do it. Like before an FCS came out, I wanted to see how they could do a deceleration jump, a rebound jump. Okay, well, smash these things together and just create a checklist. Not that you have to do them, but that if you didn't know what to do, that you'd be like, hey, I could look at these things and I'd be better for it. Same thing with, the clinical side. Like, do I think you have to go step by step? Well, the further you get into clinical practice, you fall further away from the system because your own personal system is better. But in the beginning, in particular, as a student, brand new grad, you need a world-class system to get world-class results. And then you can start tweaking and honing it on your own.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially when people are starting out. And I found that I needed to do this was systemize my like initial patient exam or intake and things like that, just so that I can look at and maybe see what's normal. What does normal look like for all these different things? And once we get what normal looks like, all of the discrepancies and all the differences that may or may not be associated with pathology just pop out at you and you go, oh, well, this is the biggest thing right here. Because I've seen, this human body, 100, 1,000 times. And now here's the nuance that is leading to this issue. And this is how we solve that issue to accomplish our goals. Now,
One of the tough thing we're talking about running. So one of the tougher things is if we talk about gait analysis, whether it's walking or running.
oh, yeah.
If we talk about normal, there's an idealized, right? I would say, Thomas Schode wrote the book on it. Has anybody in the world ever seen an idealized gait pattern? I don't think so. I mean, I think it's an impossibility, even from the brand new infant walking, because nobody has perfect symmetry, from an anthropometric standpoint. They have learned behaviors, they have developmental asymmetries just from a movement perspective. So that is, we talk about this all the time is like, we use the analogy of like, why is water tasteless? Well, it's so as a human, if it's poisoned or not. Other animals, water isn't tasteless. Like different water sources would taste very different. Like we would taste wine, but we have to tell if, there was a dead cow upstream and we're like, oh God, don't drink it. That's what you're trying to do with a gait analysis is like learn what tasteless water is, right? What is normal while you're never going to see it, which can be frustrating. But that's the game, right? And you hit the nail on the head as you're trying to do what? Something jumps out at you. Now, tough thing in our world is different things tend to jump out to different people. And then there becomes this kind of point of conjecture. Again, that's why I teach. I think that's why we're all on this ever learning, journey is like, can we get closer and closer together? Not because I'm right or you're right, but because that is more true. And that's, that gets very tough in a world that we live in. It's very gray.
Especially in an interdisciplinary kind of approach where people could be, kind of doctor shopping, or I saw this PT and they said this, and then I saw my massage therapist who said this, and then I went to ortho and they are thinking this, and then you're just sitting there sifting through all these different opinions, And you may or may not have this glaring thing like, well, it hurts when you sit. And then when we did 10 press ups, your pain went away. So like, that's
Right.
all you need to do, you know?
Yeah. Trying
And
to make it fundamental.
like,
Yeah.
that's our, like oftentimes it's that KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. Sometimes things, can get really overcomplicated, especially
Mhm.
in gait analysis and running biomechanics. And when I first went to school, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to
Yeah.
know all of the nuanced, complicated intricacies of pronation and foot strike patterning and all this stuff. And what I found is if you just dial it back and you really look at the forest through the trees, you can get a lot of really big things that stick out at you in a lot of runners. And it's like, oh, your tissue capacity in your Achilles just isn't where it needs to be. Or you've let that cycle, that continuum of tendon pathology occur over and over and over and
Mhm.
over again. It doesn't matter what I do to you manually today. You got to stop irritating the system.
Yeah. The tolerance. Yeah.
And I think that goes to looking at running loads and a lot of variables associated with running loads that you obviously are going to talk about in your Rethinking Running Rehab coursework. And I know that you've probably looked at many runners' programming, and you probably see some themes like recur, right?
Hmm.
As far as like, oh, maybe not anymore since we can't buy the shoes anymore. Like, oh, I switched to Vibrams and now my feet
Yeah.
hurt like hell. But what are some things that you see that maybe go awry with coaches programming these days?
Yeah.
Like, what are some commonalities there that may be predisposing individuals to injuries? Not saying that not saying that
Yeah.
coaches are causing injuries. Nobody's trying to make anybody get hurt. But sometimes we can look at somebody's programming and be like, oh, this is it right here.
Yeah. Well, I think the one I want to touch on for sure, I think there's two, I don't know if I'd tell them two different sides of the spectrum, but two different kind of paradigms here with the youth athlete. So we look at a youth cross country runner, usually entering cross country, seventh, eighth grade, right? And I always call them the left behinds for the most part. You'll get a stud runner. I mean, if you're in California and you're running from Newberry Park or whatever, if we're somewhere that it's high level, it's a
The
little
Woodlands
more.
High School, baby. Shout out. That's right.
Around here, it's becoming more prestigious because the past 3 years, Alabama's just been crushing it in terms of who they're putting out. I mean, Ethan Strand just broke the, 800 record and collegiate. Like, so all these things are kind of going down. But my thing would be most coaches around here, even though there's some really good coaches, what do you see as a very common thing for the seventh, eighth grader going into cross country in the fall? We're going to run 30 miles a week starting from day one. And you do that every week for the whole summer. And then they're going to up it a little bit. And the intensity is going to go up, right? You're going to have workouts and stuff. Usually it's just kind of low volume. That's when we see the most injuries, right? Poor accommodation because it's a new activity. You've introduced novelty and volume in a kid that's probably also going through a growth spurt more than likely, which adds just a whole other kind of conundrum. So my thing there would be, again, can we add tolerance to a system from a tissue perspective, from a movement perspective, without just stacking, one, well, let's call it a skill, right? Because, the hierarchy that Gray Cook came up with, like, running is a skill and you just stack the skill on there without knowing movement competency, without knowing tissue tolerance, without knowing kinesthetic awareness, right? Like athletic ability, which again, if we talk about the left behinds, now we're talking about those kids that maybe aren't the most athletic, which it would be really hard for them to even do a skipping pattern. And we're asking them to run 30 miles a week, which is in essence skipping the whole time. So I think again, you need a very easy, like you said, you need to be like, oh, you sit down and you have pain. I did 10 press ups. We need something for coaches where it's like, maybe it's a prep to running program for youth athletes. Dear God, that should sell like hotcakes. Hey, we can hopefully not injure your kid as much and make them run better. I think that would be filled with things like jump rope and body weight lunges and, deceleration jumps and, coronal plane movements. And pretty soon you'd be like, oh, we're not getting the bilateral shin splints, again, air quotes, that you see with every new runner, or we're not, bailing out mid-season with some asymmetrical hip issue just because like everybody has an asymmetry. So that would be one side of it, right? Is that we just dump the same program on somebody that has never run or hasn't run much, and then you're just going to get outliers that handle it well. The other side of the spectrum would be, it's kind of the same, but bias coaching just based on either how they were taught. You come from an RRCA background, you take a class, and then you get that same kind of ubiquitous, just everybody's doing the same, even though people may have wildly different goals. This is the thing that frustrates me. So I see everybody from people that want to run fast 5Ks to 100 milers and beyond 100 milers. If they get in a certain coaching group, it looks very similar regardless of goal. And I'm like, this is nuts, right? This is crazy. So that's kind of, it bugs me. But what I try to always tell those people is what we talked about earlier is like, I'm not going to rewrite your coaching, right? That's not my job. You're paying them. I don't want to burn a relationship. But let's talk about like health and longevity, right? Because if you're not getting, most runners, even if they're really good, aren't getting paid because it's hard to be a pro runner. If you're an amateur runner that's even running, a sub-3 marathon as a guy or something, like you're never going to make money from it. So let's say, I would love that you love doing it, but let's maximize your health and longevity while we're doing that. So who's to say I couldn't get you to run faster or as fast with, again, maybe less volume, less intensity, mixing up what we're doing, improving how you move, dear God, as you run, which seems unheard of. Which again, if we talk about like Peter Attia's centenarian Olympics, like how you move and how you do other things, like could you be improving that while you're getting better at running instead of, what do we see? We see a divergent path with most people with running, right? We see loss of muscle mass as they get older. They lose mobility overall. They become very, linear in their movement. That's not what I want when I'm 80. And I love these stories of, the guy winning, the elderly Olympics, whatever it's called, and, setting records, and somebody that's run 500 marathons. That's fantastic. I want to be able to move and get up and down off the floor when I'm 80, not just run a half marathon, at 2 hours or something. So again, you and I are clinicians. So I think that comes at the heart of, I want to be a performance person, for that athlete or that patient, but I also want to make sure that like we're maximizing your health, or at least not detracting from it, which becomes a bit of an oxymoron even when you're talking about ultra marathons, because in essence, it's not healthy. So we have to really kind of weigh that against what somebody's doing.
I completely agree. I mean, just, oh man, the amount of just knowledge bombs you just dumped. I just want to like, I feel like we just need to like tease apart some of those things. And I think when you talked about those youth athletes, the ones that just start out running 7th or 8th grade, one, video games are not becoming less fun. And we're now seeing like there's a lot more weakness in those 7th and 8th graders because there is more playing in a sedentary position versus going out and playing, pick up stickball or the pickup game of soccer and things like that. So I think that's something that coaches need to be wary of, and thinking about that 7th or 8th graders' entire lifespan, health span, and athletic career. I spent a lot of time running in the sagittal plane, and I got okay at it, and then when I got into grad school, it's like, oh, now I have all of these other things that I can do, such as rock climbing and ultimate frisbee and all this other stuff. And man, I'm still peeling back the layers of the injury onion that I created for myself, and still like opening up my hips and all these different things, because all that I did was run in the sagittal plane. And going back to the factors that you talked about as far as like measuring variables, I think some variables that coaches need to look at is, what variables am I inputting into this athlete to get obviously the outputs that I want, but also the outputs that are necessary for the health of that person over their entire lifespan. We also need to get rid of this kind of like chew them up and spit them out mentality, or the next up mentality that we see a lot. A high school coach will see an athlete for 4 years and then they're gone. A college coach will see an athlete for 4, maybe 5 years if they redshirt their freshman year, and then they're gone. So if we don't do the things that, are going to prepare them for their entire like athletic career or their entire lifespan, it doesn't matter, because they're going to be gone. They're going to have a next new batch of individuals that they can then just do the same thing. You can throw the eggs against the wall, and the ones that don't break are going to be freaking stud athletes. But then I was definitely like one of those people that kind of got left behind, 2 stress fractures in my freshman year of high school that really affected me, not only physically as far as from a detraining perspective, but also mentally as well. Because I wasn't able to hang out with my buddies, and, coming back off of not 1, but 2 stress fractures, that hits you in the space between your ears pretty hard. And then just rampant injuries throughout my entire collegiate career, which is really the reason that I started this whole damn podcast.
Yeah. Well, a quick story on that is so Chelsea High School, which is right down the road from our office, in the past 3 years has put out, a ton of runners. Like, we got a couple kids that are running at Kentucky now. A couple, I mean, all over the place, but are setting, records. I think the next couple of years are going to be awesome. Some of them I think are going to go beyond college and run. That to be said, there was one kid in particular that was set to run for Auburn University, and junior year rolls around. This kid had always had some like lateral foot stuff, like had a very stiff foot, grew immensely. He was 6'2", is going into his junior year. Just kind of way he ran, really caught himself in a massive supination angle, and had a hard time not putting stress up through lateral foot. So runs into a stress fracture of his fibula, in fifth met, and it's just kind of it's all over the place all the time. So I kind of just told him, I go, hey, if you want a shot at running, you're gonna have to stop running. It's the Gray Cook adage. Like, I cannot change a motor program. Like, I have to get you to stop running. We will work as hard as we can to change it. And we did. I mean, it took 6 weeks, and I was like, deload. I mean, we were in this kind of like stress fracture phase. So I was like, you're not running anyways. The short of the long is he goes back into senior year, you're running better than he did. Right towards the end of his senior year, I think it was the second to last race of the year before, basically, I think it was before sectionals maybe. Foot starts hurting him. We kind of made the call clinically. I was like, I don't think it's a stress fracture. It's a reaction. You could still run. But you could tell, like, mentally, he had been through the ringer so many times that he's like, ended up not running at Auburn, but cool enough. The kind of silver lining is this kid loved it so much. And I'm not saying it was me, but it's the conversations we had that, like, you want to run your whole life, right? And yes. Like, and we had this conversation of like, it's beyond, is now, has stayed in contact with the coach at Auburn, runs with the team every once in a while, is now the assistant coach for the women's team. And is also possibly up for another spot on the team. So, like, stuck with it. But what has he been doing? Not just slamming 100 miles a week. Like, he realizes, I have issues that other people don't have. I say issues, things I got to work on. Has worked like a dog on those things and is now paying dividends, versus, like you said, just kind of like, we've normalized that runners, that you get injured if you run. And we just kind of say, yeah, that's kind of normal. Yeah. Versus maybe the coach having a little more, I don't want to say moral, ethical obligation, like feeling a bit responsible for, like, oh, if somebody gets hurt under my guys, like, maybe that's on me a little bit, versus, football, there's trauma. Maybe it's not training injuries, but, like, in this scenario, like, you're the one imploring the load, like, on that athlete. Like, who's to say that it's a inappropriate, amount? Yes, I think there's something to be said of where I'm not blaming a coach, but, like, maybe if you had more onus, you would be more apt to change training around individual athletes. But, he had a good outcome. There's a lot of student athletes that do not, that just stop running because they hit a frustration point. They hit an injury point they can't come back from. But at the end of the day, what are we doing? We're trying to make healthy humans for their whole life. And if you remove something that I think is, it's a normal human movement, right? My 3-year-old daughter, nobody taught her how to run. It's running is a human movement. And somebody says, I'm kind of done with that. And they were doing it at a super high level in, Division I or Division I athlete. That's kind of sad.
I totally agree. And, that's some of the stuff that I'm kind of like unraveling too, is like, when I go back to running, my Achilles will probably flare up again, stuff like that. And I think you're right. A lot of, it's a heavy burden to bear being a collegiate runner coach, because you're the one telling them what to do. And a lot of coaches will say, oh, well, they're not doing it, right? But a lot of kids are. A lot of those really type A motivated kids are doing that and then some. Now, in terms of increasing resilience in our tissues, like our increasing bone mineral density, increasing connective tissue capacity, whether that be a tendon, a ligament, or a muscle, what are your thoughts on strength training for runners? So this is something that I really believe in, and I think that there are a lot of misconceptions that I've written about in my PDF, Strength Training for Runners and stuff like that. What kind of tools, or I don't want to say protocols, but what kind of methods and things do you prescribe to your runners? And what kind of things do you use for runners to improve those tolerances and capacities?
Yeah, one of the first ones that I always try to elucidate, because I think for whatever reason, it seems to pique everybody's interest, whether you're an athlete, a clinician, or a coach, is Keith Barr's work on
Oh yeah.
tendinopathy. And just looking at literally, if you looked at somebody that's a little more stretchy from a soft tissue standpoint versus somebody who's stiff, and then if they're dealing with an injury, of how we would treat the injury and the post treatment, right? Building tolerance, resilience. And the quick and dirty on that, if you haven't covered it, just for people listening, is if you're a really stretchy person, say maybe we're getting up on the Bacon criteria, which that's in question. I don't know if you've seen that. They're,
Oh
recalling
really?
the Bacon criteria. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Um, which good. They should keep looking at stuff. But so say you're higher on that criteria, or you're what we're going to call a pseudo hypermobile, our video gamer, seventh grader, right? And then we should basically treat them differently. In the broad, strokes here is they would do better with more ballistic load, plyometrics to kind of stiffen that matrix versus if you get a me, right? I'm stiff from a soft tissue standpoint, which is great for a sprinter, not so great for a distance runner. Well, I'm going to be better dealt with heavier loads, but going through a much slower, in particular, eccentric phase to kind of heat up the tissue as we have time under tension and kind of create more of an elastic effect. And how I drive this point home is there's a upside down bell curve out of a research article. I couldn't remember the author's name right now, but this surprised me. So I throw it into a talk. Where do you think most elite marathoners would fall on a bell curve in terms of mobility, right? If one end is completely stiff, the other end is hypermobile, they actually fall on the more mobile end, which I would be like, oh, we just think that running kind of tunes tendons and stiffens you up as you have to handle all this impact. Well, what do you see? You see, East African runners and things that have full mobility, but fantastic motor control. So they can access a full windlass mechanism, wind up their Achilles fully and let go. So it comes down to not less. It's one part, tissue phenotype. Well, it's one part motor control. You have to be able to control that stuff if you can get into these full ranges of motion. And that's from a strength training standpoint. I always tell people like, yes, we love it. I can phenotype you right away. And it's not like we do one or the other, but I get that seventh grader, dude, plyometrics, jump rope, fast, quick, poppy things. I get my 55-year-old guy that big toe doesn't move and ankles don't move and his Achilles keeps flaring up. Guess what he's going to be doing? Slow, heavy sled pushes and, heel raises that are weighted, maybe 1.5 times body weight or something like that. So I like that phenotype approach. And then my second take would be, let's break runners out of the sagittal plane. So if I just had those general rules, like, hey, let's put you in the stretchy stiff category. Well, then let's also, hey, we have, the transverse and coronal plane that you rarely access. That's great for what? Breaking apart kind of habitual motor patterns that maybe aren't, paying you dividends. But also making sure that we're dialing in things like balance, because you're basically jumping from one leg to another. And it plays back into the longevity thing, right? Staying mobile, through the transverse plane, because I know you've seen as many as I have, how many runners, cyclists, triathletes have a T-spine I could, bounce a quarter off of. And then we got to talk about breathing mechanics with that type of rib cage. Like we could just, right away be like, your performance is not maximized just because you don't move in this area of your spine. So yeah, I think that's where applying load appropriately, and then always being a sniper as much as you can, right? Trying to be like, yeah, I would do this for you. I would do this for you. And yeah, we could give general strength training guidelines to most runners because they do little to none. So yeah, just try to be a little bit better than the rest by not just give them something that is made for them.
Yeah, and that was kind of my aim, was really just using a flamethrower basically on this issue of runners just not strength training, or if they are, they're like, oh yeah, I did some strength training, I did some clamshells, and then I took an 8-pound medicine ball and I did some twisting lunges, and yeah, strength training, right? And it's like more like increasing fatigue and not increasing any tissue tolerance whatsoever. But I love that breakdown of phenotypical expression. So for those of you who aren't familiar, like your genotype is your genes or your DNA sequence and kind of what you're born with. But the expression of those genes is what we would refer to as our phenotype. So that would be, we have a genetic sequence that basically encodes for how tight or how loose we are, which was what we were talking about with Keith Barr's work. And then the expression of those genes would be our phenotype, which is how we have physical manifestations of that genetic sequence. And I love the nuances there, because I feel like there's this huge trend towards, well, we need to have a randomized controlled trial. We need to have multiple randomized controlled trials with systematic reviews. And then we need to have meta-analyses. And then we need to have a meta-analysis of the meta-analyses to really see if anything works. And it's like what you're losing with that really high level of research. Don't get me wrong, I love that stuff. I was literally a supplemental instructor for statistics. So like I'm like as nerdy as they come with that kind of stuff. But I also know how that bell curve and how much we lose the higher order we get with those reviews and things. Because if you look at the highest level meta-analyses and systematic reviews, what most of those tell us is we don't know anything and we can't do anything.
Yep.
But that's because that individual variability is so lost once you get into those much higher order of research. So we've got to keep an open mind, and we've got to change tactics based on the newest research that comes out. But we can't keep an open mind so much that our brain falls out of our head, and we can't lose our common sense. I listened to
a strong theme in RX3 or Rethinking Running Rehab is, we look at gait, we nerd out on it, but like, when should you try to intervene to change somebody's gait, right? Rather than letting like your table treatment and other, rehab training bleed into this, integrative motor pattern that running is. So we approach that as a question, like, should you, when should you, is it appropriate? If you looked at big meta-analyses on can you change gait? It's going to say, yeah. And then it's going to give you, your typical stuff. Like, we can tell people to, increase cadence. We can tell them to land softer. And then you'll see direct correlations in the meta-analyses too. If we had somebody, try to land softer, we see a decrease in injuries. So then that's going to be a broad sweeping just thing that this happens, right? It's going to go into runner's world. And you're going to see people, hey, try to land softer. I always try to give the straw man proposition. If you looked at the other side of the equation is, well, there's a whole body of research that says you need to actually increase the amount of impact into the ground, be better at attenuating it, which gives you better elastic recoil. And that is what the best runners in the world are doing. Now, just because the best runners in the world are doing it doesn't mean that Beau Beard should do it. And that's, the cool and, data detail there is the biggest indicator of injury for an amateur runner is what? Mileage. Biggest indicator. So the more mileage I run as an amateur, the more likely I'm to get injured. Do you know what the biggest indicator of success is for a high-level elite runner? Mileage. And this is just, if you look at meta-analyses, you're like, well, that gets frustrating. So then you have to be good at what? Determining like what level of athlete, patient, runner you're working with before you open your mouth about modifying training or what are they doing right or wrong. So you can see how it's like you said, pay attention to the fundamentals. Like, I got the 7th grader that plays video games in front of me and they want to run a bunch of volume. I don't need data to tell me that's a bad idea. It does, but like, just use your brain, right? Common sense goes a long way. And then, knowing the details is fun when needed, but rarely needed at the level that we think we do.
Well, we all know from normative data pools from high-level runners and these pooling samples that were done by Jack Daniels that every single runner should run at 175 steps per minute for their cadence. So luckily it's as simple as that. We just
especially calculated off of a wrist top watch VO2 max calculator.
Yeah, it's like, geez, like the devil's in the details. If somebody's 6'3", then like their cadence isn't going to be the same as somebody who's 5'2".
Yeah. I think we keep dancing around the theme of common sense. I mean, this whole thing's been like, you want to learn all this stuff, because I've always said, I think sometimes in the rehab world, if we're talking clinical, it can look like we're leaning towards just generalized exercise, right? The way the profession's spinning. Well, that's because 70% of America is unfit. So like, that's going to be of benefit to build tolerance, resistance, decrease pain. There's a whole subset of that population though, that has, mechanical issues, motor control issues, tissue pathology, trigger point, whatever we want to call that stuff. And then if you're working with an elite athlete, you better know the nuance and details, right? Because that could be the differentiator of performance gains. So again, it is a clinician, we have a responsibility that supersedes a coach. So you have to know more. But again, the best in the world know a little bit about everything. And then you just kind of go off in your niches. I kind of forgot where my tirade went there, but yeah, that's just kind of my 2 cents on that.
And then, well, at the same time, there's the opposite side of the coin where we as clinicians also need to learn from the coaches. Like
Oh, 100%.
this past weekend, I was at the Parker seminars and I got to learn from a lot of really, really cool people. And I'd say, gosh, maybe one of the top, like, quote unquote clinical speakers was Mike Boyle,
Yeah.
the strength guy, and I just got so much practical information from that talk. And he really turned a lot of my thinking on its head, and he's
I
like,
call
what?
somebody like Mike Boyle, basically a medical whiskey machine. So he's distilling everything that we know into a much more applicable, easier to kind of convey and teach to other clinicians and coaches. That's what he's really good at. That's why he's spoken, on the circuit for 30 years and written a couple books. Is like he's distilling where you're like, oh yeah, why didn't I think about it like that? Like it doesn't really change what you're doing per se. You're just like, yeah, that's a lot easier, and that's what we need more of. We don't need more complexity in this profession. We need more. We got a ton of info. People are, again, Brett Winchester quote, he's like, people are drowning in information and, dying for applicability or whatever's quote. Like, yeah, they don't. Cool. What do? You got somebody in front of you, all this stuff. You got to, get them out of pain, make them perform better and, make them a healthier person. Cool.
Yeah. The other population that's really drowning in information, I'd say would be the athletes themselves, because you've got a Garmin watch on right now, right? The Garmin.
Chorus, bud.
Oh
Come on.
gosh, yeah. Sorry,
Ooh.
I've gone to the Timex with no Bluetooth, just
I love it.
start stop. It actually just ran out of battery, so I'm gonna have to buck up and spend the $25 to get me another one soon.
There's a lot of benefits to that.
So with the utilization of various wearables, we could say, from, you can have a Whoop, an Oura Ring, the Coros, the Phoenix, that measures basically every facet of your physiology, and they're getting better and better. Now, what are the things that are important for runners to look at and coaches to look at, and what are the things that, what changes should we be looking at? Say, oh, this was a good change, or this is a normal change versus this is maybe a change that we want to look at.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, I think, I can't remember, there's a syndrome now of basically, the measuring things all the time, where it's a form of like hypochondriac, whether, you're not sick, but you think like, oh God, like I've literally heard people say, oh yeah, my fitness level is like a little lower. Like that's what your watch said. Like, what, come on now. But they're adherent to it, right? It's not just a passing, sentiment. The things that I think you really need to feel or pay attention to would be feel. And this is I think, a huge differentiator for elite athletes. People that can feel, and this is tough. Like another mistake story by Beau Beard, a college local to here asked me to teach just a quick seminar to their athletes. And I let them pick what I was going to teach on. And they said, can you teach us how to differentiate between injury and like pain and stuff that I should like go through?
Oh,
good luck teaching that seminar, right? That didn't go so well. But because when you get to the end of the seminar, it's what I'm about ready to tell you is like, that takes probably a big training experience, a lot of probably running into different injuries and pain, but then intuition, kinesthetic awareness, like all of these things get amalgamated. And then you're like, man, some of the people, we know this from running, right? The best in the world typically aren't the best in the world. It's the people that didn't take as much time off as other people due to injuries, right? So they have a bigger training load because they don't keep hitting hurdles with time off. And the people that are maybe more talented fall out of that because of how they got coached or whatever. So my thing would be, well, how do you, what's this feeling thing rather than being led by, data that's, coming from an algorithm or something like that, is not necessarily how you feel on each and every run, but maybe how you feel overall when you're not running. So we know, there's things like red S, like this relative energy deficiency syndrome and things like this that like you can, the whole idea of can you overtrain or can you just like under, nutrition and things like that. But I'd say if you're feeling like dog shit 90% of the time as you're in a training block, something's not right. And the likelihood you're going to get injured is probably higher, whether that's due to lack of sleep, overtraining, under nutrition, under hydration, whatever it is. So I think the feeling that you're getting outside of running, because as well as I do, you go out for a run some days, it feels terrible. You go for a run other days, it feels amazing. And we're always beating our head against the wall of like, well, what was the differentiator? A watch is not going to tell you that. You're going to have to come down to, that's where training journals came from. And like, God, I slept 6 hours. I felt terrible. Like, oh, there's a correlation. Well, we're trying to take data and then build a feedback loop. Hey, I know if I sleep poorly, I train poorly or feel bad. Okay, don't do those things. That's the whole goal. But as we get more wrapped up into technology and become, the quantified man, you got to build intuition and a feedback loop at some point. So I'd say if you're a data nerd, I'm just like you're supposed to cycle caffeine, which maybe we don't, even though we know we should. Get rid of
High
it, everyone.
versus just medium, right? You
Yes.
just go like
Yes.
this, and then your curve is
Dark roast,
trending
light
upwards,
roast.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, just get rid of it every once in a while. Try to build a better feedback loop of how you feel, not necessarily how you're running, your times, your speed. And then because we do see the highest correlations to injury or what? Lack of sleep, stress. It's not, it is how you train, but it's everything wrapped around it, right? The outcome of the training itself. So if I have somebody run 6 hours a week that's sleeping 8 hours a night, eating really well, they've never run in their life though, versus I get somebody that's run for 10 years and I take away 2 hours of sleep, they only get 1,000 calories a day. I'll break that runner that's got a huge training age compared to the other one. Right. So I've tweaked the variables just in a different way.
Yeah, I had Lucy Haynes on the podcast. She is an incredible athlete. She climbed 514 in rifle, which is pretty gnarly, as well as got second in Leadville in the Leadville 100 in the same summer.
Cool.
and now she's a sports psychologist, so she's like a mental training coach, and she also has had personal experience with disordered eating, relative energy deficiency syndrome, and it's one of those things where it's like you can never really say like, oh, and now she's overcome it, like that's just those feedback loops and things like that are something that are always there,
Mm-hmm.
and she's always like working with those, and she's on the better side of those things. But exactly to your point, a lot of times you talk to a bunch of different people who know a lot about a topic and they talk about the same things. She didn't say, oh, go out and get the latest Chorus, get the latest Garmin 360, go get the latest Aura ring. And she said, you need to cultivate body awareness, and you need to recognize how your body is feeling. You need to cultivate an awareness of your mental states and be able to track those things and track these qualitative measures and not just the quantitative.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to become more and more quantified, and those algorithms are going to be better and better and more predictive of elite athlete performance. But at the end of the day, we cannot lose sight of the importance of the qualitative data, which is why this is called the art of assessment, or this is called the art of prevention, why your course is called the art of assessment, and why we need to rethink a lot of things like running rehab, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
And again, in a seminar that I'm teaching, I'm trying to not leave it up to the unknown variable, right? Like if you've read Endure by Alex Hutchinson, he tells the story of, basically his bell lap and something's wrong with the clock. And he thinks he's 4 seconds behind. He's actually ended up 8 seconds ahead, PRs, and then has this PR cascade for the next few races. The, whatever you want to call it, central governor, the mental game, but that's what you're kind of training every day, right? A run that feels terrible, even though physiologically you're the same, may be a more beneficial run for you to go through than the day that you feel amazing, right? Because you get that kind of like push. If you went purely by data, right? If you wake up and your HRV is a little bit dipped and you're like, I'm going to just take it off. Like you won't get that effect. That effect's gone completely, right? Because you won't ever get that mismatch. So I think you use Ben Stevens, he's from Canada. He made fun of me the other day because I said weaponize. He's like, that's very American. But you weaponize the ability to say like, hey, I may not be at my best, but I am going to train. But if you did that every day, It's not a great thing. Every once in a while, it is a good thing. So yeah, I think I agree with her 100%. And then, welcome to the best coaches in the world. That's what they're playing with at that level, right? It's almost at that level, like the physiology, the training. Yeah, that's super important. But like the mental motivation and all of those other things, that's kind of that's the 1% right there. And I believe that in a lot of other fields, in professions, not just, athletics.
I completely agree. And we're kind of winding down here. Although, gosh, we could talk for probably on each one of these topics that we've discussed. We could do a whole podcast on. And don't worry, I'm going to be bugging you to come back on again at some point.
For
And the way
sure.
I love to end all of these podcasts, Bo, is talk about basically Benjamin Franklin and the volunteer fire department in Philadelphia. And he has this very famous quote: "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." So we've talked about a ton of different things, from advice for runners, coaches, clinicians, KPIs, advice for coaches for youth athletes, strength training for runners, all these different things, qualitative versus quantitative measures, etc. But if we could distill this talk into 1 ounce of prevention, what would you say to people?
Yeah, it may be a little bit different than you think, but and am I wrong? Is it Socrates? Is it know thyself? There's somebody else. Plato? I don't know. It's a famous
Lao
Greek philosopher.
Tzu.
Lao Tzu. Oh, way off. Not even.
Know thyself and know thy enemy. If you know thyself
Yeah.
and your enemy, you need not fear the result of 1,000 battles. I just did a whole thing
Whoa.
on it. Sorry.
Look at that. Wow. I'm impressed.
I did it last week. The title of my last podcast was "Know Thy Enemy."
Yeah.
So yeah,
So that's what I would say is know yourself. But because then that's going to go across patient, athlete, clinician, coach. And what I mean by that is, let's break each one of them down. The athlete, know yourself. This is tough for, you're a seventh grade, you know who you are. You don't know anything about running. But if, you're a 35-year-old, mom of three that's wanting to get a half marathoning, I would hope that like if a coach throws something at you that looks like advanced, right, or scary, it probably is for you. And then like you got to know where you're at, within this thing. If you're a patient, knowing yourself, we have patients that come into our kind of clinic style. It is not the best fit for them because they don't want an active care model, even though they may be an athlete, which is kind of it's like crazy pants to me that somebody's like, yeah, I'd rather you do things to me than me do things. I just want to go run. And then we get into the clinician. Let's say let's say you're a year into practice and by some random, stroke of chance or something, you get a professional marathon in your practice. I'm not saying you couldn't handle it, but know yourself and know your limits. And maybe there's a better referral or somebody you can ask for help. Or the other side of the coin, say somebody isn't a great fit for your practice, right? Like they're never going to go home and do, home care rehab. Well, hey, the appropriate thing to do is to refer them to somebody else, even though that may not be in your eyes the best care. It's the best thing for them. And then same thing for the coach, right? Knowing the athlete you're working with, but knowing how you're going to interact with those people, right? So say there's somebody that you wouldn't mesh with from a personality standpoint, somebody's giving you pushback on your coaching ways. That's where again, what I mean by the best coaches in the world, they know themselves, but they literally have to become super adaptable within that. You'll see outlier coaches that are concrete. They don't move and the world wraps around them. Welcome to Nick Saban, right? I don't think he's adapting to every player. He's just built this prowess that it's like, I don't move, you move around me. But he knows that he knows himself, knows how he operates. And again, that applies outside of the medical performance athletic sphere. Obviously, that I think that's one of the most important things you could do as a human is kind of take time to dig inside, know what's going on with you, and know what's kind of motivating you daily so you don't get burnt out. And then we could like wrap that right back into training for a marathon, right? Like you may have a 12-week plan and like, why the hell am I training for this thing when you get 6 weeks in and it starts to go a little hard? So again, getting back to that kind of that initial why, which I know you just, saw Simon Sinek in Vegas. So yeah, kind of going to that and know yourself. So yeah, that'd be it.
gosh, well, thank you so much, Bo. I really actually I got a ton out of this myself. So I'm going to be re-looking at my Keith Barr literature and diving into those different phenotypical expressions myself. And we're definitely going to have you on again to talk more shop
Love
about all
to.
these different things.
Love
Uh,
nerding out. So I'm game.
yeah. So thanks again, and we'll be chatting soon.
Thank you, man.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Art of Prevention podcast. If you did enjoy and or benefit from some of the information in this podcast, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Or please give us a 5-star review on any platform that you find podcasts. One thing to note, that this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. No patient is formed, and if you are having any difficulty, pain, discomfort, etc. with any of the movements or ideas described within this podcast, please seek the help of a qualified and board-certified medical professional, such as your medical doctor or a sports chiropractor, physical therapist, etc.